My boss fired me without knowing who I really am. Now he's begging for help. I had worked for this company for 5 years, always staying late, always going the extra mile. I wasn't just an employee, I was the guy who kept everything running when things got tough. But none of that mattered the day my boss fired me out of nowhere. No warning, no explanation. Just a cold, "We're making some changes and we have to let you go." I walked out with my head held high. But what my boss didn't know, I had been the one holding the company together. And without me, it was about to fall apart. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I still remember the exact moment it happened. One minute, I was in my office, wrapping up a report that, ironically, was meant to help my boss fix the company's bleeding finances. The next minute, I was being called into his office, where he sat behind his massive oak desk, barely looking up as he dropped the bombshell. "We're making some changes," he said, flipping through some papers like I was just another name on a list. "We have to let you go." I blinked, convinced I had misheard him. "Wait, what?" He sighed, finally looking at me with that fake sympathy I had seen him use on others before. "It's not personal. We're downsizing, and unfortunately your position is no longer necessary." That was a straight-up lie. I wasn't just some random employee. I was the one keeping the entire IT department running. The company relied on the systems I had built from scratch. Without me, they'd be lost. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I don't get it. My team is already short-staffed, and I handle most of the back-end operations. Who's going to take over my work?" He waved his hand dismissively. "We've already outsourced most of it. It'll be fine." Outsourced? My stomach sank. I had been hearing rumors, but I never thought they'd be dumb enough to actually replace our entire IT infrastructure with some cheap third-party service. "Look," he continued, standing up as if to signal the conversation was over. "We appreciate everything you've done, but this is just business. Just business." I clenched my jaw and nodded. "Fine." But as I walked out of his office, one thought kept running through my mind. He has no idea what he's just done. Walking out of that office, I wasn't just angry, I was insulted. 5 years of loyalty, overtime, and fixing problems no one else could handle, all tossed aside like I was nothing. I wasn't even given a proper explanation, just a generic downsizing excuse. But I knew the real reason. He did. He was the kind of guy who loved power but hated responsibility. When things went wrong, he blamed others. When things went right, he took all the credit. And now, he thought he could cut me loose and have some outsourced company take over my work for half the cost? Yeah, good luck with that. I packed my things without a word. My coworkers were stunned. Some even looked scared. They knew how much of the company's day-to-day operations depended on me. The fact that Greg didn't realize it just showed how out of touch he really was. As I walked out, my teammate Jake rushed up to me. "Dude, what the hell? They actually fired you?" "Yep," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Apparently, I'm no longer necessary." Jake let out a low whistle. "Man, this company's screwed without you. Half our systems still run on the software you built. Nobody else knows how to maintain it." I smirked. "Yeah, I know." And that's when I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to do anything at all. Because Greg, he had already signed his own company's death warrant. I just had to sit back and watch it all crumble. For the first time in years, I actually got a full night's sleep. No late-night calls about system crashes. No panicked emails because someone accidentally deleted critical files. Just peace and quiet. But I knew that wouldn't last long. Sure enough, barely 3 days after my termination, I got a text from Jake. "Jake, dude, it's happening." I grinned and called him immediately. "What's happening?" "You know that cheap outsourcing service Greg bragged about? Turns out they have no idea how to manage the custom systems you built. Everything's falling apart. Payroll's delayed, customer orders aren't processing right, and our internal database keeps crashing." I laughed, shaking my head. "Wow, that was fast." "Oh, it gets better." It tried reaching out to the outsourcing company for support. But guess what? They're based in another time zone, and their response time is absolute garbage. People are furious. I could practically see Greg sweating through his overpriced suit. I had warned him before about cutting corners with IT, but he wanted to save a few bucks. Now his entire operation was spiraling out of control. "Let me guess," I said, leaning back in my chair. "He hasn't admitted he screwed up yet, has he?" Jake snorted. "Of course not. He's blaming everyone else. Classic Greg. I wasn't gonna lie, I was enjoying this. Not because I wanted my coworkers to suffer, but because Greg had been so sure that I was replaceable. And now, he was learning the hard way just how wrong he was. But this was just the beginning. A week passed and things at my old company went from bad to an absolute dumpster fire. Jake kept me updated, and honestly, I couldn't have scripted a better downfall. The outsourced IT company was a joke. They didn't understand the custom systems I had built, and their solutions kept making things worse. Employees were locked out of critical files. Customer complaints were piling up because order tracking was broken. Even the company's email server went down for a full 2 days. And through it all, Greg was still pretending everything was fine. But the final nail in the coffin came when payroll failed to process. Nothing sends an office into full-on chaos like people not getting paid. Employees were livid. Some even walked out on the spot. The HR department was overwhelmed with complaints, and upper management was scrambling to figure out what went wrong. Jake sent me a text. Jake, Greg's losing it, man. He's been in meetings all day trying to fix things, but nobody knows what they're doing. The execs are pissed. I chuckled, shaking my head. This was exactly what I had warned Greg about. He thought he could replace me with a cheaper service, and now his entire company was paying the price. Then, 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I had a feeling I knew who it was. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? There was a pause. Then, a familiar voice came through. Hey, it's Greg. Oh, this was gonna be good. I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. Greg? Wow, didn't expect to hear from you. What's up? There was an awkward silence on the other end. Then, Greg cleared his throat. Look, I'll get straight to the point. We're having some, technical issues. Oh, really? I thought, barely holding back a laugh. Yeah, I said, playing dumb. I heard some things weren't going great, something about payroll. Greg let out a heavy sigh. It's a complete mess. Orders are stuck, half the team can't even access their work files, and our IT provider keeps giving us the runaround. We need someone who actually understands our system to come in and fix this. Someone like you. There it was. I pretended to think about it. Huh. That's interesting, because last time we spoke, you said I was no longer necessary. Greg groaned. Look, I might have underestimated how critical your role was, okay? But this isn't about the past. This is about fixing the problem now. I let that hang in the air for a second. Then I smiled. So, let me get this straight. You fired me, outsourced my job to some budget IT company, let the entire system go to hell, and now you want me to come back and clean up the mess. Yes. I almost laughed out loud. This guy had some nerve. I glanced at my laptop. Since getting fired, I had been working on a couple of freelance gigs, setting up my own consulting business. I wasn't desperate for work. Far from it, huh? But I wasn't about to let Greg off the hook that easy. Time to see how far he was willing to go. I let the silence drag out just long enough to make Greg sweat. Then I sighed dramatically. You know, Greg, I'd love to help, but I'm really busy these days. Freelance work has been booming for me. He jumped in immediately. We can compensate you well. Just name your price. Oh, now he wanted to talk money? Interesting. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk. Okay, let's talk numbers. What are you offering? Greg hesitated, then mumbled, We'd match your old salary. I actually laughed this time. Oh, Greg, you're funny. You really think I'd step back into that dumpster fire for the same paycheck? Let me remind you, I wasn't just doing my job, I was keeping that company alive. And now you want me to come back and save you from your own bad decisions? He sighed. All right. What do you want? Now, that was the right question. I sat back, pretending to think. Here's the deal. If you want me to clean up your mess, it's gonna cost you. Triple my old salary, full back pay from the day you fired me, and a 6-month contract minimum. Oh, and I work remotely. I'm not stepping foot in that office again. Silence. I could practically see Greg's jaw clenching. He hated that he had to beg me, but he had no choice. Fine, he muttered. I grinned. Pleasure doing business with you. But what Greg didn't know was, I wasn't just coming back to fix things. I had my own plans. It wasn't about the money anymore. Sure, the offer was tempting. Triple my old salary, not bad. But the truth was, I was already doing better with my freelance gigs. What really got me was the opportunity to turn the tables. I set up a meeting with Greg a few days later, and I could tell he was already stressing. The outsourced IT company had barely done anything, and now he had to depend on the one person he had fired. The irony wasn't lost on me. When we sat down, I could practically feel his desperation in the air. He tried to act cool, but he couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. All right, I've agreed to your terms. What's the plan? I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Well, first things first. I'm not fixing everything right away. You're going to have to suffer for a bit. Your employees need to understand the gravity of this. You can't just push the panic button and expect everything to go back to normal. Greg's face twisted. What do you mean? I'm paying you to fix this now. I grinned. Yeah, you're paying me, but I'm calling the shots. You had no idea what you had until it was gone. So, for the first time in a long while, you're going to learn how much your company needs me. I could see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't happy, but he knew he didn't have much choice. All right, he said slowly. What do we do first? Well, I said, let's start by getting rid of the so-called IT support you hired. They've been a nightmare, and I'm not dealing with them. He hesitated, but finally nodded. Fine, I'll fire them. Good choice, I said. Next, we'll put a temporary Band-Aid on the system, but don't expect miracles. I'll need full access to everything, including your finances. You wanted the real deal, now you're going to get it. Greg didn't look happy, but he didn't argue. I knew he was regretting his decisions, and I was enjoying every second of it. But the best part was still coming. A week passed, and the chaos was still far from over. I had managed to patch things up temporarily, but I wasn't rushing through the process. Greg had wanted to play hardball when he fired me, and now he was learning the cost of that mistake. The team was disgruntled, productivity was down, and Greg had to answer to the higher-ups every single day. Meanwhile, I was coasting along, my freelance business had taken off even more, and I had built a network of clients who appreciated what I could offer. Honestly, I was in a great place. And Greg, well, he was sinking fast. One afternoon, Greg called me again, his voice strained. Hey, listen, we've got a meeting with the board coming up. The execs are really unhappy. We need results, and fast. I could practically hear him sweating through the phone. You've got to do something now, or we're going to lose everything. I smiled. Greg, I told you, this takes time. But don't worry, I'm doing everything I can. You'll have a solution eventually. Greg practically begged me to step it up, but I had no intention of rushing. The more he panicked, the more leverage I had. After everything that had happened, I knew Greg didn't hold all the cards anymore. The next day, the real bombshell dropped. Greg called me again, this time a little quieter, more defeated. I just got word from HR. They're offering me a buyout. I raised an eyebrow. A buyout? Really? How does that feel, Greg? To be on the other side of that decision for once? There was no answer. I knew exactly how he felt, helpless. It was a taste of his own medicine. Let's be clear, I said. I didn't come back to rescue you. I came back to prove that I could run circles around you, and now you're seeing the consequences of your choices. All the budget cuts, all the outsourcing, none of it worked. Greg didn't say anything else. He knew I was right. I hung up the phone, sat back in my chair, and smiled. The tables had turned. Greg had tried to burn me, but in the end, it was me who had the last laugh. Before we wrap up, I need your help. We've noticed the channel has been losing a bit of traction lately. If you could subscribe, it would mean the world to us. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you great content. Your support truly makes a difference. Thanks so much for sticking around. Let's keep this channel growing. Now, let's move on to the next story.